welcome to another edition of Daily Clout. I'm your host, Breeauna Sagdal, the Associate Editor for Daily Clout, and today I have with me Dave Roetman. Dave is the former chair of the Minnehaha Republican Party. He is the former finance, data, and political director for the state party. And Dave is doing some very interesting things in South Dakota politics right now. I would consider Dave to be sort of an insider, if you will. And I have him on with me today to discuss why it's important to follow South Dakota politics and what's happening in our state. Dave, please, would you tell our audience what you're up to?
Well, I'm up to a number of things, but since I've left the party, I've been involved with a number of projects, especially involving grassroots organizations. There's a lot of political foment at the grassroots, at the level of the voters. They are not happy with the results of the 2020 election. They're not happy with the direction of the country. And there are people that have never been involved in politics before are suddenly coming up to me and asking, how do I get involved? What do I do? And they don't know what to do. So I'm in helping grassroots organizations. I'm also helping candidates because candidate season's coming up here pretty soon, and starting the 1st of January here, we'll be having people running for all kinds of legislative races. And because of redistricting, I expect there's going to be a lot of primaries. There's been remarkable change at the ground level, at the state district level. Further, I think there's going to be some challenges at the state level. The South Dakota is the state is very red. We have Republicans have control of all of the statewide offices, from public utility commissioner up to governor, and the Democrats have been completely shut out, and they have been for almost a decade now. So there's going to be, however, some internal bickering in the party. I expect there's going to be a challenge to the current Secretary of State, and there's going to be challenges to some of the statewide office holders like the governor and U.S. congressman. Wait,
so you're telling me that there's a challenge to America's sweetheart, Governor Kristi Noem?
Well, yes. Just a few weeks ago, Steve Haugard, who is the former House leader, he was the House leader. He's from District 10 here in Sioux Falls, and he is termed out of his district, and he's going to be running in the primary against Kristi Noem.
That's right. That's interesting. I recently interviewed Steve Haugard on the Sanford health issue. When Sanford Health moved to mandate that their employees receive the vaccine. And so we had a very in-depth discussion about South Dakota's economy. And he had brought up some very good points about how do we address a pandemic head on if we have staffing deficits. And I thought that was a very interesting approach and a very sound approach to policy and decision making, especially on the public health side. So, so that's really interesting. I will definitely look into that and see if he's interested in doing another interview with me. So South Dakota seems to be a very interesting state to watch right now, I would say. And in particular with an eye towards 2024. Do you have any insights and what people might maybe want to pay attention to as far as what's happening in South Dakota and who else is interested in this state?
Mm-hmm. Of course, even though South Dakota is one of the most Republican, most red conservative states in the entire country, South Dakota is a very interesting state because we have a lot of thought leading coming from South Dakota. We have a pension system in South Dakota that is second to none. Other states look to us for leadership. Furthermore, we're a small state. And so in some ways, South Dakota is a target from outside of South Dakota by outside interests who use our initiative and petition process to try to change our laws from the East and West Coast. It's very interesting since given our population density and the fact that it's very easy to get things on the ballot, our petition and initiative process is very easy to put stuff on the ballot, which is a good thing.
Can I stop you there and ask you two quick questions? So the pension plan that you are referring to, in Oregon, we call this PERS, I believe, and this is the Public Employee Retirement Fund. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, okay. I just mentioned that as something that South Dakota does very well. Our pension system, last I heard, is funded at 104%.
Wow.
And compare that to, say, other states like Illinois, which is bankrupt. So our pension system is very well funded. Moreover, the people we have put in charge of this are very good at what they do. And so other states look to our pension process as a leadership. We invest in something, they invest in something. And that's why I'm bringing it up, because South Dakota is remarkably influential considering its size.
That's really interesting. I know for a fact that Oregon has been running at a $26 million deficit in their PERS fund, and has done some very creative math to try and make up that money. So moving along to the initiative petition process, is this how marijuana was introduced, or recreational legal marijuana was introduced into the state of South Dakota?
Yes, they bring this up almost every year, every cycle. It's fairly easy to get on the ballot for initiative process. It's basically like putting a law through the legislature. And so all you need to do is get a certain number of signatures, around 16,000 for initiated measure and about 32,000 for constitutional amendment. And so what we've had, though, that is still quite a number of signatures you need to get, and you need to hire people. It's very difficult to do this as a grassroots thing with all volunteers. But you can find that if you can raise money, especially we've had in the past, for example, in 2016, we had 10 initiated measures on the ballot. All of them were funded by outside interests. Money was coming from Boston and New York and California, and they would hire outside people to come circulate petitions in South Dakota. Now, we've tightened up our restrictions, our laws about this just a little bit, but it's still very easy to get on the ballot. $500,000 in Boston, Massachusetts does not get you much as far as politics goes, but in South Dakota, you can run an entire statewide campaign. And there are people in South Dakota who make it their business, their jobs, to take that money and make themselves, quite a bit of pocket change, line their own pockets, but they also circulate petitions, get things on the ballot that they can't get through the normal legislative process. Given how well governed South Dakota is by Republicans, this is the way they can get stuff on the ballot.
I see. So what would be the strategy behind using a state like South Dakota in order to pass something like legalize marijuana, for example?
That's another reason why they're targeting South Dakota for this stuff, because we're such a bright red state. They can go and say, well, South Dakota, look at how conservative and red they are. They passed this law. And then look, we've got these other states that are blue. They passed this law. It must be a good law because it's bipartisan. This small conservative state passed this process. And what to me is striking about it is how deceptive they have been when they're passing these petitions out, and when they're campaigning to get this passed on the ballot. They will, if you want to legalize something, like say you mentioned marijuana. If you want to legalize marijuana, whether it's for like medical marijuana, all you need is to have a couple sentences. That's really all you need. But they repeatedly brought multi-page, 20, 25-page initiatives full of that are very badly written. And they've been pushing that through. And of course, when you're voting in the voting bush, you see about 200 words explaining this. But it's really a 20, 25-page document, which has all kinds of junk in it. In some cases in the past, didn't happen in 2020, but I think it was 2016. Don't quote me on that, 2016. Where the law, if it would have been passed, would have required every single citizen, every single resident to actually grow 3 pot plants.
Whoa.
But
so you're saying they're stuffing more things into these bills than just what is on the ballot title.
Right. And they're poorly written, oftentimes unconstitutional, sometimes they're contradictory, and they just throw the kitchen sink in.
Wow. And now, may I ask, in the state of Oregon, the Secretary of State writes the ballot title, most often anyways. Who writes the ballot title and the description here in South Dakota for these initiative petitions?
Right. It's a combined effort between the Secretary of State and the Attorney General. The Attorney General writes a 200-word description of what the effect is, and that's what's on the ballot. But as is Attorney Generals in the past and the current Attorney General have complained about, 200 words is not enough to explain some of this stuff. The Secretary of State does put the title on it, for example, Amendment A, Amendment B. They are the ones that put that stuff on the ballot, and both those offices have to sign off on it. And also, they go through it and make suggestions about the legality and of the bill.
Interesting. So both the Secretary of State's position and the Attorney General in the state of South Dakota are really important positions.
Yes. Yeah, very much so.
I would gather from
State,
hearing that.
right. The Secretary of State is key to doing this. They, of course, they manage the election process. They're very important because they have to process all this paperwork and keep track of it. And they run the election office.
Fascinating. So now you mentioned that there are people who sort of run this initiative petition process as a full-time career. Is there another initiative petition that's coming up, or something that's being worked on that people should know about in South Dakota?
Yeah. So, like I said, a lot of the stuff is coming from money's coming from out of state, but local folks are the ones that are running the processes. For example, Rick Weiland, who ran for Senate as a Democrat several years ago, has been instrumental in circulating petitions. And of course, he pays himself a nice salary, and then he circulates petitions. Now, currently, they've only managed to put to the Secretary of State one amendment, and that is for Medicaid expansion. And this is very interesting because Medicaid expansion keeps failing in the South Dakota legislature. Okay. It's $100 million pot of money for the hospitals here in South Dakota. And initially, this is a federal program where the 90% of it would be paid by the federal government. And Medicaid right now is set at 130% of the poverty level. That means everyone at or below the poverty level is already covered by Medicaid.
Wow.
30% above that. So they want to expand that to higher than 130% of the Medicaid of poverty level for Medicaid expansion. And again, this would be $100 million going to the hospitals. And this is the one thing they managed to turn in petitions for this coming cycle. However, that has not been confirmed by the Secretary of State. They have to go through all the signatures, make sure they're valid, and so that they can put that on the ballot.
Wow. And so what is the opposition, or what is the argument in opposition to expanding Medicaid?
Okay, well, of course, obviously, the people at or below the poverty line have already been covered by Medicaid. Moreover, this is an expansion of a government program, which would cost quite a lot of money to the state of South Dakota. And there's people who think we simply cannot afford it. Moreover, some folks point out that some of the people who would be put on Medicaid actually now have private insurance, and they lose private insurance. And that would not make them happy because private insurance is generally considered better than Medicaid. Those are the kind of the arguments.
Is that really the choice? A second opinion, essentially having that option for who they can receive care from or what kind of care? Is that why it's better?
Oh, so it's been my experience, and my family has been in the medical services. My father and brother are optometrists. And for the most part, I can tell you, since I used to, build Medicaid for stuff, Medicaid just is not as good as private insurance.
Got it. Well, and it's interesting to me because, moving from Oregon to South Dakota, I was absolutely shocked at how low our health insurance rates were. A family of 4 in South Dakota pays $34 a month, and our deductible is extremely low. I paid $5 in office visits, so it's not like some, astronomical number on the other side because we have such a low monthly premium. So I find that to be very interesting, this idea of Medicaid expansion. And I know that's also, and I know this is a bit off topic, so I apologize, I'm putting you in the hot seat a little bit, but I know that there is some pushback against the current budget that was just signed or agreed to, because it did take on quite a bit of federal funding in order to create new agencies and wraparound services as it would be. However, as I understand it, that money is not a prolonged funding, and the taxpayers of South Dakota will then have to foot the bill for those new agencies and services.
I think you summed it up right there. That's the concern that a lot of legislators have of what's happening with the expanded budget, because as Reagan might to paraphrase Reagan, what he might mention is that a government program once created as eternal life, and it keeps growing and growing and growing. And that is the concern, because South Dakota is a conservative state. Moreover, we've had a balanced budget for many, many years. And we've also resisted having an income tax. And part of the reason we've been able to resist having an income tax is because our state government is not as large as other state governments. And the more you expand it, the more you have to tax.
I see. So now, when you say a conservative state, that might be misconstrued to some viewers. And what you mean is fiscally conservative, the size of the government. That's what I'm hearing, if I'm correct. So conservative, when you're bringing it up, means that the government is not as large and as expansive as, say, California, Oregon, Washington, New York, New Jersey. But it's a little bit, or a lot of it, smaller, which then I would imagine means that there's potentially less intrusion into individuals' everyday lives. Or can you maybe touch on that a bit?
Well, I've been into other parts of the country, and yes, the South Dakota state government is not nearly as intrusive as it is in other states. I mean, we have people coming here from Minnesota all the time, and they are amazed at how little they interact with the state government. For example, I know people who have houses, lake houses up in Minnesota, beautiful area, right on the lake there. They can't even cut down saplings without getting permission from the government to do things, and that simply is not a thing here. So really, South Dakota is in many ways way America used to be 50, 60, 70 years ago, where we had a lot less government, we had a lot fewer bureaucrats, and we had a lot less fewer regulations on day-to-day life.
And we're finding that is very attractive to individuals.
Oh yes,
who are now flocking
South
to
Dakota in many ways is a difficult state to live in. It's very cold in the winter. It's quite hot in the summer. There is no river traffic to use for industry or manufacturing. There's a reason why, given the size of our state in terms of size, that we have a very light population. Is because 100 years ago it would have been difficult to live here. It's very cold. It's a much nicer weather in California. It's much nicer weather in Florida. But South Dakota has in many ways preserved some of the best aspects of America, where you have a smaller, less intrusive government that taxes you very little. We don't have income tax, and that's very attractive to people. So a lot of people are moving here now.
Right. I was listening to the radio the other day, and the estimates are pretty impressive. Individuals and their businesses are moving to all areas of South Dakota, but the report that I was listening to was specific to Sioux Falls, and it was coming from the director of the Chamber of Commerce there. And they recently held a leadership meeting and training, and they had more applicants than they knew what to do with. They have all these people who have moved and now are very interested in getting on board and getting involved in their local area, their local community, and and they've brought their business and their finances here. And so I think that's very exciting. I think that's very exciting to many people in South Dakota industry. I want to ask, do you think, in your personal opinion, do you think that Kristi Noem might end up running for president in 2024? What are your opinions on that?
I think she has her eye on it. I get to ask that question quite a lot, and I keep telling people the only person who can answer that question is Kristi Noem. But she does have her eye on it. It's quite obvious that she does have national prominence, and we're quite proud of her in some ways because she's able to bring some attention to South Dakota, but more importantly, bring forward some of the conservative allies you have.
On that note, I have a quick question about sort of where you see the future of South Dakota. Where do you think South Dakota will be in the next 5 to 10 years? And what do you think are some of the concerns, pitfalls, bear traps, and what do you see as being some of the really exciting points that we have to look forward to here?
Well, the exciting part about living in South Dakota is we have a very good foundation. I mean, we have a good family structures. We have good infrastructure. We have a good pension system for the government. We have very good schools. South Dakota's economy is doing very well. We used to be very, very dependent upon agriculture, but now we have banking, and now we have other industries that are starting in South Dakota that are providing a lot of jobs. Now the concerns would be, well, right now, for example, we don't have enough housing. There's just that we can't build houses fast enough. And so that's one concern, and that is driving up prices, especially for people who currently own homes, and it's going to be more difficult for them to find a home. I mean, when I bought my first house, I paid $87,000,
Wow.
It was a nice house in a good neighborhood. And so I was able to be a homeowner very soon after graduating college. But, that's going to be a little more difficult now because starter homes are shooting up in price. So that is one of the concerns, but I think that we'll get through it. I think we're not only going to bring people in who are engineers and working in the banks, but also people who are carpenters. And we need your carpenters. Send them to South Dakota. We'll put them to work.
Yep. Excellent. Well, Dave, I want to thank you so much for your time today. And if you can believe it's already been a half an hour, it goes by when you're having great conversations. So thank you so much for
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And how can people get in contact with you if they're interested in running, or if they're interested in getting involved, or if they just want more information about South Dakota politics?
Okay, well, you can simply send me an email, daveroetman@gmail.com.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.